Welcome to the Daily Dog. This is episode 54, and we are getting ready for the big SEC championship game between Georgia and Alabama Saturday, tomorrow, in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in downtown Atlanta at 4 o'clock. It'll be time to decide the SEC championship. The SEC, we're coming to the end. This is championship week of the 2025 season. It's hard to believe, but here we are, and we're already in week 15 of the season. It seems like we just got started and just got going, and here we are at the end. Championship week comes, and then we see where on Sunday we find out where the playoff rankings will come out, where Georgia, where the other teams, where Alabama, win or lose this game. We're going to find out where everybody is going to be set to play or not play, whether they make the playoffs or not. So this is episode 54 of the Daily Dog. This is going to be our breakdown and predictions podcast for the game. We might squeeze in a Saturday morning podcast just to touch base, but I don't think so. I think this will be our big hit before, and then of course we'll come back after the game and we'll have reactions and breakdown. I think what we'll probably do is do a quick reactions podcast after the game on Saturday, probably for Sunday morning, and then of course Sunday afternoon or evening they'll release the playoff rankings, and we'll get all the information, and then we'll have a lot to talk about where everything was set up. There's a lot of options on the table, and it's hard to know exactly what's going to happen. I've been talking to a number of people who said, what do you think is going to happen? Is Georgia going to end up with a home game? Some people are wanting to get ready and plan ahead for that game. Some people are it's just, there's a wide range of what could happen here. So Georgia, of course, is in the 3 seed. And that maybe gives us some cover, possibly if we lose a close game to Alabama, another top 10 team. Possibly we could hold on to the 4 seed. I think a lot of it's going to depend on what else is happening in the brackets and the rankings. If you take a look at it, we moved up to 3. You got Texas Tech at 4, Indiana and Ohio State at 1 and 2. So 1 and 2 are going to play each other in a game that's largely, as I opined on a recent podcast, meaningless, because they are going to, basically they're both going to be number 1. I mean, they're both going to make the playoff, and they're both going to get buys. I think we know that already. They've gone undefeated on the whole season. They're head and shoulders above the other teams statistically. I'm not saying I necessarily think that Indiana is definitely a better team than Georgia, or even or that Ohio State and Indiana are equal. I think Ohio State is a very talented team, but it's also hard to exactly gauge because I do think they've had a little bit easier schedule. I've got some thoughts on that, and I think we'll get into that more tomorrow. I don't want to spend too much time on that today. I think we'll just focus on getting ready for Georgia, Alabama, and all the things we can talk about Georgia and Alabama. What I do think is true, though, is that the committee is going to look at those 2 teams as head and shoulders above everybody else. And as long as neither of them just gets blown out or embarrassed by the other, and probably even if they did, I don't think they would be dropped below a 3 or a 4 seed. So I think we can count on Indiana and Ohio State having 2 of the 4 buys or top seeds, 2 of those top 4 seeds. So then you have Georgia at number 3 and Texas Tech at number 4. So both teams are playing in their conference championship games, and both teams are favored to win. Texas Tech is more favored to win than Georgia. They're playing BYU, who they already played once this season, just like we're playing Alabama. We've already played once this season. And of course, we lost to Alabama at home. Close game. We've talked about that a lot. And obviously, we're going to talk about it more since we've got a rematch and it's pertinent information now. But BYU and Texas Tech played at Texas Tech in a big game. Game day was there and everybody was there to see it. Patrick Mahomes was the guest picker on game day that day. And the net result was that Texas Tech won the game handily. They won it 29-7. And most people think that's a 22-point victory. Most people think the game really wasn't. It's another one of those games that wasn't as close as the score actually was. So I think, it's reasonable. They're favored by double digits at least. I'm not sure. I think it's 10 to 13 points or something like that. Georgia is favored by 2.5 points over Alabama. It's been interesting to watch the line on the game this week. ESPN's matchup predictor computer-based model simulation has run tens of thousands of simulations, and it keeps finding that Georgia is about 49% chance to win the game and 51% chance for Alabama to win the game. Vegas, on the other hand, has set the line at 2.5. So it means it's really, really close. And of course, remember, Vegas, I'm not a betting guy and I don't encourage gambling, but the Vegas lines are very instructive. I've talked about this on and off all throughout the season. Probably nobody does a better job of actually predicting the games than Vegas. And look, most of us are just talking heads or coming on in a podcast like this, or the big national media guys, even on TV. They're already getting paid to be on TV and give their opinions. And so not much is going to change if they're right or wrong. But the betting world, the Vegas line depends. How they set that line and how that works out is going to mean everything, sometimes on millions upon millions of dollars on the line. And of course, their job is not to predict who's going to win. They're not trying to say, look, we think Georgia is going to win by 2.5. Part of what they're trying to do is motivate people to bet on one team or the other. And that's one of the reasons the lines moves. When a line moves, it's not always because something has changed or somebody has found out something really important and that changes the nature of how the game's going to be played. I mean, sometimes there is that information. If a star player gets hurt in practice and looks like they're not going to play in the game, then the line was set. Let's say a team was favored by 7, and then that star player, gets hurt and they're not going to play. Well, the line might go down to 3 or 4, or maybe even all the way down to even. Or, if that player was that important to the team, maybe they even become an underdog in the game. But that's, again, it's mostly following where people are betting the money, because they're trying to balance the money on the equation and get to a certain point where at some point they can see, look, if this goes this way or this way. And that's why there's the half in there, right? So you get to 2.5. So that's a handy little trigger for them, because if Georgia wins by a field goal, then that is just over the line. So the people who bet Georgia will be winners, because they had 2.5 points that they were giving up, as we say. So they bet Georgia, and they're giving 2.5 points back to the house. So if Alabama were to win the game, or Georgia were to win the game 29-27, then they would lose the bet, right? And I know you probably know this, but if Georgia wins the game 30-27, then they win the bet. And so that fine line often makes a big difference. But because so much money is on the line, it's stunning how often they are right. And it's stunning how often a game that was maybe a 3-point, you saw it as the line was 3 points on the game, or 2.5 points, and maybe somebody was up by 10, and the game was basically settled, but the backups are all in, and then the team that's trailing scores a late touchdown and goes for the onside kick. And next thing you know, all of a sudden now the game is a 3-point game instead of a 10-point game, which can, if the line was 3.5, let's say in that situation, then all of a sudden who wins and loses the bet completely flips. So, I think it's been interesting to note, though, a lot of times you see these lines fluctuate as people are betting, as money and perception goes. And honestly, the will of the people, who people are confident in, sometimes says a lot about perception. It's almost like taking a national vote, because there's so many millions of people out there, or tens of thousands of people at least, who are betting on these games. So as the money comes in, Vegas looks the line. If people are over betting on one team, then they'll change the line to try to balance the money a little bit. Again, they don't want to have a situation where everybody has bet one team and the line is such that, there's a good chance that team's going to win, and then they're going to be ending up, if that team wins, they're going to be ending up paying out just, millions upon millions of dollars. So they try to balance it out and just get to the point where they're going to come out ahead. So a lot of times the line really reflects more of the will of the people, if you will, almost like a popular vote, more than it does anything really intricate or important or different that anybody has learned or has deep inside information about the game. But anyway, it is always interesting to me when a line is stubbornly stuck where it is. And they usually go up and down. And we've talked about that all season. I've reported them, said, well, Georgia started as 11-point favorite and it's gone down to 9 and then back up to 10 before the game. This one opened at 2.5 and stayed at 2.5. And again, the ESPN matchup predictor says Georgia's 49% chance to win, and Alabama 51. So it's going to be incredibly close. And look, all the last games, Alabama beat Georgia in the SEC championship game in 2023. Georgia was undefeated, was favored in that game, was a better team, I believe. But Alabama won the game. And it was a 3-point margin. They were 27-24. And honestly, that margin ended up being, we had a fumble deep on our side of the field. The defense stood tall, didn't let Alabama advance hardly any yards at all. They were forced to settle for the field goal instead of being able to get the touchdown. They got that field goal, and we lost by a field goal. Now, again, no game that goes 60 minutes with all these different plays and that had 27-24, that many points on the board. No game is decided by a single play. But it is interesting to note that largely the difference in the game is both teams played pretty evenly, but Georgia made one critical mistake. Alabama didn't. Alabama won the game. Otherwise, the game was pretty much an even game. You look at the game that was played in Sanford Stadium this year. Alabama jumped up to a 14-0 lead, had 8 third down conversions in a row. Georgia didn't look able to stop them, but slowly but surely the defense started to wrest control of that game. Alabama would score 24 points in the first half. Again, not great. You never want to see your defense give up 24 points in the first half. But Georgia fought back. The defense fought back. Alabama did not score in the second half. And as I have said many a time on this podcast, just keep referencing it throughout the year, Georgia had the ball 3 times in the second half of the game, trailing by only 3 points with a chance to tie or take the lead. Because obviously you could get the field goal, or if you got the touchdown, you take the lead. And all 3 of those drives either started at or near or reached midfield. One, we started back deep in our territory, drove to midfield, and then was forced to punt. One of them, we were around midfield and we stalled out and punted again. And then there was yet another where we, obviously everybody remembers the big play, and I've talked about it a lot, where we drove down to inside the 20, inside the 15, and had a 4th down play. And had we kicked the field goal, the game would have been tied at that point with about halfway to go through the 4th quarter, or 7 or 8 minutes. I don't remember the exact. We'll look it up and get into that detail in a little bit. But we didn't do that, and that's been much debated, and we don't need to rehash that now, but I'm just kind of in the sense of we don't need to re-prosecute that, but we're bringing it back up to talk about the game and say, look, that ended up being the difference in the game. That's, again, a lot of different plays in the game, a lot of different things happen, but we look at the recent history, there's every reason to believe that these two teams are fairly even on talent. We see that from recruiting. We see that on the talent composite indexes. When you look at that, we see it the way the games have played out. Even the game 2 years ago last season at Tuscaloosa. Georgia, again, down big early, down 28-0 early. Everything went right for Alabama to start the game. And then, boom, Georgia starts mounting the comeback, actually takes a lead, only to give up, a 75-yard touchdown on the last offensive play of the game for Alabama. Georgia get the ball back with just enough time to get within sniffing distance of the end zone, but the desperation play led to an interception, and we end up losing yet another 1-score game. So no matter what each team has done, or no matter what Georgia has done in most cases, and also you can go back to a lot of the earlier games in the 10 out of 11 that we've lost, several of which we've talked about. 4 of them were for SEC championships, 2 of them for national championships, although in the national championship, we split those. We've lost all 4 SEC championship games, but we did split the 2 national championship games. So, that's 6 of these last 10. So we lost 10 out of 11. The one that we won was included in those 6 games that were for championships. 4 SEC championships and 2 national championships. So we split one and we lost one, won one on the national championship. We've lost all 4 SEC championships. So I already talked about in the previous podcast, look, this feels like a huge moment. This feels like a big opportunity for this team. And I started thinking about it. These seniors, I read, some of the stats on them, and it was pointing out these seniors are 50-5. They've won 2 national championships. They've won 2 SEC championships. They did obviously beat Alabama the one time, because one of those national championships was beating Alabama in the game, which at the time seemed very cathartic. And I think we all hoped that that was sort of getting over the hump in the hex. But now this team, and as fans and on this team and everybody, Coach Smart and his staff, we all have the opportunity to feel like another catharsis moment is on the precipice here, that we can go into this game. We are favored. We should win this game. All the things are pointing in that direction, that we have a good opportunity. It's not a runaway slam dunk, but most people seem to feel like Georgia's better team and playing better football at this time in the season. So we were just, really our own mistakes short of winning the game at home previously. So now this is a neutral site game, and Alabama's beaten Georgia every time in Mercedes-Benz Stadium so far, but this feels like the moment of catharsis. So look, we're going to take a break. This is the end of quarter one. We are doing our 4 quarters today. All 4 quarters are going to be dedicated to talking about and breaking down the game. As we get to third and fourth quarter, we're going to get into our breakdowns, offense, defense, and predictions. But for now, this is our introductory to just thinking about the importance of the game and where we go from here. And we're going to get a little more perspective on that in quarter 2. So it'll just be a short break, and then we'll be back for quarter 2. So stick with us. Thanks for listening to The Daily Dog, episode 54. Go Dogs. Welcome to quarter 2 of episode 54 of the Daily Dog podcast. It is Friday, December 5th, and we are getting ready for tomorrow's SEC championship game against Alabama for Georgia, a big chance at redemption. In fact, one of the interesting things, we'd be able to say, if we can win this game, Georgia will have beaten every opponent it's played this year. Granted, it would have taken us 2 opportunities to beat Alabama, but we would still have beaten every opponent we played this year if we can win this game. And I talked about it on the podcast on Wednesday, and I brought it up again in quarter 1, that this feels like a big turning point, a big moment of catharsis, an opportunity. And I know that it felt that way when we won the national championship game in 2021 in Lucas Field in Indianapolis. It felt like, we finally broke through the Alabama hex. Of course, the Alabama hex was not as deep and as long then as it is now. We've talked about how Alabama has won 10 of the last 11, which that dates back to the 2008 game, which that in itself was the beginning of a huge turning point of disappointment. Georgia had finished the 2007 season strong in the top number 2 or 3 in the country. I didn't look it up, but I remember somewhere in that way. And we started we were on the cover of Sports Illustrated. I remember Matt Stafford and other guys being on the cover of Sports Illustrated, and everybody hailing Georgia as the number 1 team in the nation preseason. And so we started out not playing very well, and we actually lost the number 1 ranking without even losing a game. We played the first couple of games and we fell from 1 to 2, and then we fell from 2 to 3. And Alabama came to town. I think they were ranked 8th, but Georgia was still favored. It was game day was there, and everybody was excited. And this felt like a big opportunity for Georgia to reclaim the top ranking and assert themselves as the best team in the country, which a lot of people thought coming into the season. And instead, we fell flat on our face. We absolutely got demolished at home in what was just a hugely disappointing game. And that began this run. Actually, up to that point, we had won 3 in a row against Alabama. As I mentioned in a previous podcast, we'd won the home and away series in 2002 and 2003. And then the 2008 game was the home return after we had gone to Tuscaloosa in 2007, which you might remember was Nick Saban's I guess that was his first year. But anyway, we had gone to Tuscaloosa and won the game in Tuscaloosa in 2007. So we had a small 3-game winning streak going against Alabama, and then we lost that game. That was miserable. And since then, we've only won the 1 game. Now, the good news is if you're only going to win 1 game against a SEC rival, it's absolutely wonderful to have that at least be for the national championship. And the other trend that we feel like at least really doesn't apply or mean anything actually in terms of, I mean, there's no real meaning to the fact that this is what happened, but it does make us feel good to look at it and say, hey, Alabama has never beaten Georgia twice in a season. They have had that opportunity at least once. They beat us in that SEC championship game in 2021. For the 2021 season, we turned around, we met in the finals of the national championship, and we won the comeback game. And you never want to take the SEC lightly or say it's not a big deal, but I think we all feel like that was, if that was the trade that had been presented to us beforehand, look, you're going to have to lose the SEC championship game, but you get to win the national championship against Alabama. I think we all would have taken that trade. So I know that's not how it worked, but it did work out that way. And we have other history. We talked about this on the podcast on Wednesday too. We have other history where Auburn had beaten Georgia as Georgia was ascending in Kirby Smart's second season, 2017. Georgia ascended to the number one ranking for the first time since that 2008 season. Georgia ascended to number one and go to the Plains, the loveliest village on the Plains, as the folks in Auburn, as I think is a big joke, like to say. It's not a lovely village and it's not on the Plains. I don't know why they think they're in Oklahoma. And they refer to the flat middle lower part of Alabama as plains. It's just flat land. But nonetheless, I guess you can say Auburn fans are optimists. They like to put a good spin on things. The Plains is the loveliest village on the Plains. It's just a small town in a flat part of Alabama. But okay. Nonetheless, moving on, we went to Jordan-Hare Stadium and with the number one ranking, and we lost 40-17. We just got our butts kicked. But thankfully, Auburn turned around and beat Alabama. Also, when they ascended to number one after we lost the number one ranking, Auburn had a week off, I guess, or maybe I don't remember usually it's Alabama and Georgia back to back, or maybe they have a weak team in between, like we played Charlotte this year. So they turned around, but I think they had back to back games. So they turned around and they had Alabama at home, and Alabama had ascended to the number one ranking. And they turned around and beat them. So the good news about that was that gave us a chance at redemption. Same thing. We were able to turn around and be able to say at the end of that season, we beat every team we played that year, because we did beat Auburn, given a second chance. And we beat them thoroughly. We didn't just sneak by them. We beat them 28-7 in a nice beatdown in Mercedes-Benz Stadium for the SEC championship, which enabled us to go on, of course, to win the playoff matchup, the Rose Bowl, the epic Rose Bowl against Oklahoma and Baker Mayfield, which then springboarded us into the national championship game, which we led every minute of the game, every minute of regulation. We led every minute of the game until the final minute of regulation when Alabama tied the game up. And then from there, we took the lead in overtime. We had the 3-point lead on the field goal. And of course, it's always dangerous when you settle for the field goal, because Alabama was able to get the one play touchdown we all remember, and they won the game. But so all of this is, look, I bring it back up because, this is, I think, a big cathartic moment. I think if this senior team, I was talking about how these seniors have accomplished so much, and I hadn't thought so much about the seniors, even though we had senior day with the game at Charlotte. With Charlotte in Sanford Stadium, two things were true then. One, we know we're going to play more games. We knew we were going to, by that point, first of all, we knew we had the Georgia Tech game. We mostly felt like we were in position to lock up a playoff, even if we'd possibly lost to Georgia Tech, still going to have that opportunity. And certainly there's a bowl game to play. So it's always a little, when you have those senior games, but the senior day also is usually that opportunity to, celebrate the team at home when we know that's going to be the last home game. And yet we didn't actually know if this was going to be the last home game and it still might not have been the last home game. There is this possibility that if we lose this SEC championship game, that we fall back into one of the 5 through 8 seeds, which get the home playoff first round games. So right now we're in the 3rd seed. The 3rd seed enables us to have the bye. We've talked about that. Maybe the bye is not so great. Although I think the worst of all worlds is to play the SEC championship game, lose it, and then have to play the first round game. In that scenario, you definitely end up playing an extra game. If you play like Georgia played and won the SEC championship game last year, you could argue that there was a similar footing there between the teams that had the first round home games like Ohio State or Notre Dame and advanced into the playoff, because those teams, they played, it was later, it was December 19th or 20th when they were playing, when the SEC championship game was, I think, December 5th last year. They had and so then we had sort of a longer gap, because it was a longer gap from December 5th to January, what was supposed to be January 1st, but turned out to be January 2nd because of the incident in New Orleans. And so we had almost a 30-day layoff, whereas the teams with the home playoff games, they had, their end of the season in late November. If they played in a championship game and lost or whatever that circumstance was, they found themselves in a playoff game December 19th or December 20th. So, and that might be the perfect time. You have 2-3 weeks for some of your guys who just need a couple weeks to be able to get back and be healthy. To get healthy, everybody can rest a little bit, but you can practice pretty hard and get back out there, and you're not completely out of game shape. It feels like, since all of those teams lost, like Georgia, and again, I think that, it's hard to say for sure, because a couple of those teams I think were overmatched because of the way the seeding was, but Georgia and Oregon were definitely both top teams, number 1 and number 2, and neither team looked really prepared or in game shape to play the game, and I don't think that's coaching. I think Dan Lanning knows what he's doing. I think Kirby Smart knows what he's doing. I'm sure the team was motivated, but apparently that long layoff was sort of a bad deal. Well, anyway, we ended up kind of a little bit playing the same number of games as the teams who played their home playoff game. Just we played on December 5th and they played on December 19th or 20th. And then we all met and started playing the New Year's Day bowl games that are part of the playoff system, or the New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. And then, of course, like I said, ours pushed back to the second. So that was the scenario that we had before. And this scenario, if we were to lose and fall back into a home playoff game, that would be exciting, and we would all be excited. And I think we would probably not, I think the furthest back I could imagine us falling is 6th, and I'm not even sure we'd fall back that far, because right now Ole Miss is sitting at 6th. And so you look at that and you think that's a little bit of a stopgap, because Georgia beat Ole Miss. Now, granted, Ole Miss has 1 loss and Georgia has 2 if we lose this SEC championship game, but then Georgia beat Ole Miss, and Georgia had a better overall schedule and has more wins against top 25 teams in a top competition. So I think you kind of look at that and think Georgia probably doesn't fall behind Ole Miss. Plus, you have the idea of not trying to really count a loss in the championship game in the same way you count a loss in the regular season. It is an extra game that you earned. So you earn that game. It should gain you advantage if you gain from it. In other words, if you improve your standing. So let's take, for instance, BYU. BYU, if they're able to somehow come back despite being a double-digit underdog to Texas Tech and having already lost once this season to Texas Tech by 22 points, if they were able to beat Texas Tech, that would really change the way people perceive BYU, and would also probably move them off the bubble. They're in the spot in the bubble. They're in that 11-12 ranking slot where, yes, they're in the top 12, but the top 12 are not going to make the playoff because of the charity that we offer to the conference champions, even if they are not in the top 12, or the group of 5 champions. So in this case, we're going to have a group of 5 champion, which actually is going to be a team probably in the bottom of the top 25. There's several teams right now. North Texas and Tulane are both in the bottom of the top 25. They're playing for the American Conference Championship. Very likely the winner of that game could be the opponent for the number 5 seed. And I would say it's very likely that if Georgia were to lose this playoff game, that we would end up in that 5 seed. So it would be a favorable seeding, and it would be fun and exciting, like we've all talked about, the excitement and the enthusiasm I think we would all have about getting to have a home playoff game for the first time in December, and able to come into that game and just have the crowd, and also coming into that game knowing that you're playing a game like a team like Tulane or North Texas, who's legitimately maybe a top 25, bottom of the top 25 team, but still a team that Georgia should beat and would probably be anywhere from a 2 to 3 touchdown favorite. Well, maybe not a 2 to 3 touchdown favorite, but a 2 to 3 score favorite. So thinking, okay, maybe 17.5 or 18-point favorite. So maybe not 3 full touchdowns, but still a considerable favorite in the game, I think Georgia would be. So that's favorable, but unfavorable in that we would also have had to play an extra game. So if you are in your conference championship games, you'd like to think that your playoff seeding was set and you could have the bye because you've already played that conference championship game. Other teams that didn't play their conference championship games, well, they get these home or away first round games. Now they've played the same number of games. But if we fall back after losing the SEC championship into that first round games, now by the time we get to, if we advance in the playoffs like we hope to, for instance, pick either Ohio State or Indiana. Either one of those teams probably are going to stay in those top 3 seeds. They're number 1 and number 2 now. And I think if they play reasonably against each other, no matter who wins or loses, I think one of them stays number 1 and the other one falls no further than probably 3, maybe 4 at the outside chance. But I think the most likely scenario that we see right now, Ohio State's favored by about 4.5 points. Let's just say, and they're number 1 and Indiana's number 2. So let's just say that Ohio State wins the game. They will probably, they would definitely stay at number 1. So Indiana would probably fall to number 3, especially if Georgia wins this game. Georgia then would have the opportunity to jump up from 2 to 3. Or from 3 to 2. Then you put Indiana in at 3. And Texas Tech, if they win a game that everybody expects them to win and they're a double-digit favorite against BYU, would just stay at 4. So it gets a little more dicey if you start looking at what happens in the wins and the losses, right? And, excuse me, I'm sorry. And then the other thing that's much dicier, as I said before, is that when we win this game, we really open up a scenario where, well, if we lose the game, we definitely open up a scenario where we're going to make the playoff, and now that ensures Alabama's chance to make the playoff. Some people think they're on the bubble at 9, and if they lose, they would be a 3-loss team, and they could fall out. Having not won a conference championship, being a 3-loss team, they're essentially an at-large bid, and so the theory is they might not hold on to that at-large bid. If we win the game then, so that's an if. If we lose the game, you're definitely going to end up with the opportunity to have yet again another rematch. And so the real question would be one of seeding, because say Alabama jumped up to the 4 seed by beating us. So let's say we vacate that 3 seed. Ohio State wins the game, as I said before, and so they're the number 1 seed. Texas Tech wins, so they say, well, we'll go ahead and jump them up to number 2, or maybe they leave Indiana at number 2 because they lost a close game to Ohio State. Either way, Texas Tech and Indiana make them interchangeable at 2 or 3, and then Alabama jumps all the way up as the SEC champion of the best conference in top to bottom conference in football. And so they jump up to number 4, and they'd be 11-2 at this point. And it's not completely unreasonable. It's a big jump from 9, but it's possible. So they jump up to number 4. Then all of a sudden we come down to the 5th spot. Again, I think that's about as far as we fall. And that would make sense because you look at those 2 teams and you say, well, they're both 11-2, and Georgia lost the 2 games to Alabama. Alabama lost a game to Florida State, who's not very good, and to Oklahoma, who's a playoff team, but probably not as highly ranked as Georgia. And so the net result is they're pretty similar teams. Alabama gets the nod because they're the SEC champion. So the problem with this scenario is Georgia then plays Tulane, maybe, let's say, or North Texas in that home game, wins that game, and then the next game that would be on the list is Alabama sitting there after the first round bye in the 4th position, because the 5-12 matchup would play the 4 seed. So this is probably the most precarious thing, is that no matter how we slice it, and if we lose, if we win the game, there's still a chance Alabama holds on to the 10 slot. And so, then you're going to have them fall into maybe being 10 and going on the road to play the 7th ranked team, which right now would be Texas A&M. We'll have to see how the rankings hold out. But so they win that 7-10 matchup. So then it's going to depend on which seed we end up again. Because again, if we end up in the 2-3 seed, we could meet Alabama on that side of the bracket. So it's so we advance up into the 2 or 3 seed, but then we put ourselves in position to be the team playing the winner of the 7-10 seed, which could again be Alabama. So this is all a little dicey, but listen, we've run up to the end, or we're a little bit over on quarter 2. So we've sort of broken down some ideas about the game and just, the setting up the big picture of it. We're going to get into a little more nuts and bolts as we get into quarter 3 and 4 here. So we'll take a short break. We'll be right back with quarter 3 of the Daily Dawg podcast, episode 54 for Friday, December 5th. Go Dogs. Welcome back to quarter 3 of the Daily Dawg podcast. This is episode 54. This is Friday, December 5th, and we are getting ready, like I said, in each of the first 2 quarters leading off, that we are getting ready for the SEC championship game. And, I want to address, to start the third quarter here, an idea. And I started talking about the seniors and their opportunity to right a wrong and to add something to their legacy. They've already done so much in this team, 50 and 5 record, 2 national championships, 2 SEC championships. We're talking about them being honored at senior day on their way out at Charlotte. And the possibility, I sort of rabbit trailed off the idea that there's a possibility that while we had a senior day, we didn't know if we'd get another home game. We could end up with a home game. We could end up, if we lose the SEC championship game, with a home game, either on the Friday night, December 19th, or one of the 3 games in back-to-back on Saturday the 20th. And so we'd all be excited about the idea of having a home playoff game, and we should be no worse than the 5th seed, I think. I mean, I guess there's a chance the 6th seed, but either way, we would be the home team. And if we're that 5th seed, then we're going to have that group of 5 champion, most likely, that we're playing. So right now, maybe Tulane, North Texas. So that would be a game we think we'd be favored heavily in, and we'd advance. The downside is we might advance after winning that game as the 5 seed. Maybe Alabama slides into the 4 seed, and then our next game after our first playoff game would be against Alabama. And Alabama's first game of the playoff would be a rematch of the game they just won in the SEC championship. So this is one of the things that I think is, a bit of a problem with the way college football is constructed right now. And you can't tell me this isn't devaluing the regular season. People keep using the excitement. You'll see announcers like, look at this crowd, la-di-da-di-da. You can't tell me that the college football regular season has been devalued because of the playoff. Look how excited these people are. Look, we're going to get excited. I mean, I think one of the things I really wanted to talk about in this, starting here in third quarter, was that, coming into this game, I think both teams are probably a little bit disappointed, and it's so sad. And that's another devaluing of college football in general, and certainly the season, that Alabama and Georgia, the 2 best teams in the history of the SEC, the 2 teams who've divided up the most SEC championships between them, and who've usually made it their priority throughout history and time. Their coaches have said, boys, we go out and win our conference, become an SEC champion, we're going to have an opportunity to have all our dreams come true. You win the SEC 90% of the time or better, you're going to be in contention for the national championship. You're going to have that opportunity, whatever it is. In the bowl and poll era, it was the opportunity to go to the Sugar Bowl and prove yourself and hopefully get voted number 1. In the BCS era, you made it in that BCS game. In the national, in the early playoff era, the 4-team playoff, same thing. You won the SEC champion. A lot of times, and you saw multiple times, Georgia and Alabama, or 2 teams got in. Obviously in 2021, the Alabama didn't win the SEC championship. Georgia did, and yet both teams were in the playoff. So, there's a lot of respect and a lot of opportunity. And so the way you control your destiny throughout the history of college football is win your conference. You win your conference, then you got an argument for everything else. And now we're in a situation where like I was saying, this is an extra game. Like we might have to play 4 playoff games. And then on top of that, we'll have played this SEC championship game. So if Ohio State, I was starting to say before, if Ohio State in quarter 3, I brought this up, if Ohio State wins and they get the bye, they'll be the number 1 seed, they get their bye, then if we win out from our home game and we win our way to the national championship game and meet Ohio State there, Ohio State will have played 1 less game than us in this last month or 5 or 6 weeks of the season. So that's actually, no, they'll have played 1 less game because they'll have played their conference championship game on this weekend just like we have. They just won't have played that extra home playoff game. Last year, they did play the extra home playoff game, but they didn't play in their conference championship game. So they still only played the same number of games. So we haven't seen that yet, and that would be quite something to see a team that lost its conference championship, but then advanced all the way to and won the national championship playing what I think in the end would be 17 games, I think, if we add that up. So that's just amazing. And so you are devaluing. I mean, one, you're watering down the season because you're adding all these games to the season. In fact, think about how many games you've added. If we get to the national championship game, win or lose, having lost the SEC championship game and then forced to play that first round playoff game, we'll have played 12 regular season games then and 5 postseason games. That's just amazing. Like 5 postseason. When I first started watching college football as a fan when I was younger, the 11 games was a full season. So we've gone to 12 in recent years. Like, we're 11-1 now. So 12 has become the standard. But in my early era as a fan watching college football, it was 11. And I know from history, everybody didn't always play 11 in the years just before my time of being kind of introduced to college football. You'd look up and down and you see some teams played 10 games or some teams played 11. So, the standardization or the move towards so in other words, it wasn't that long ago that 5 games would have represented almost half, if not half, of a team's college football season. And certainly it was really close to it, right? I mean, when I started watching college football, you played 11 regular season games. So 5, there was, you were either going to play 5 or 6. You couldn't play half on an 11 season. You either go 1 under or 1 over, right? So, but I mean, that's stunning to me to think of how far we've come. And so there's no way that you haven't devalued the season because you have watered down the season. The season now has been diluted. The 11 games that I started watching as a kid of college football that, meant everything. You play 11 games and then you get a bowl game for the 12th game, and those games decided who won the national championship. Now we're going to play a 12th game, and that will not have decided anything about who's going to win the national championship. We won't even be close. We're going to have 4 rounds of games that have to be played. Some teams will play in all 4 of them, possibly. So anyway, that's quite the deal. But here's what I was also going to say is I think that both I don't know for sure how the teams feel, but I think as fans, I think the fan bases, I made this point the other day. I think Alabama, if I was an Alabama fan, I would not have been excited about this SEC championship and this matchup. I mean, I wouldn't want to lose the Iron Bowl because that would have put you on the outside looking in. They didn't have the situation where they could be like, well, let's just lose this game and we'll be better off. But looking at it, I mean, their reward for, punching their way through a 10-2 season and making it to the SEC championship game, being really the leader, I guess. Technically, they're the top seed in this, and we're the second seed because we're both 7-1, but they beat us. So looking at that scenario, as the top seed in the SEC, their reward is to play a team that they already went on the road and beat once this year. And all that will do is allow them to stay in position to get to play in the playoffs. And maybe then they might not even advance. I mean, it's not, I suggested before in quarter 3 that if they win the SEC championship game, that they might jump to the 4 seed. That's true, they might. But they might only go up to the 5 or 6 seed. I mean, they'll definitely get a home game. Right now, as a 9 seed, they would be on the road against the 8 seed. So right now, they're in the playoff, just barely, second to the last team in, and they're on the road to start their playoff. And it would be on the road right now against, I said Texas Tech before, but Texas Tech is actually 7. Well, that's if Alabama fell back to 10 after losing the game. So, which is probably true. I mean, I think if they lose this game, I doubt they hold on to 9. Notre Dame and Alabama switched places last week, and so if we beat them, they'll probably if we beat them but not so badly that they stay in the playoff, then they'll probably go back to 10, which would put them in the 7-10 matchup, which, like I said, would be precarious because by winning, there's a good chance we jump up ahead of whoever loses the Big Ten championship game to the 2 seed, which means that then again our first game would be the playoff after the bye would be the winner of the 7-10 matchup. Right now, that would be Texas A&M versus Alabama. I mean, currently Texas A&M's in that 7. So, but again, it's going to get all jumbled. If the playoffs start right now without these championship games, then Alabama would be playing at Oklahoma. So that would be interesting. They would get a chance to avenge their loss. They lost at home to Oklahoma. They'd have a chance to go to Oklahoma and beat them there. So I think that, Alabama, and I felt, because I know how I felt looking at our SEC scenarios, I was not excited about the idea of, I'm excited about winning an SEC championship. That's great. Would have been excited about the idea of Ole Miss making it to the SEC championship game for the first time. That would have been exciting just to see more teams. They're one of the few teams, or one of the teams, not few necessarily, but one of the teams that has yet to ever play in the SEC championship game. So it would have been exciting, I think, for everybody, them, the conference, everybody, see them get in the game. But it wouldn't have been exciting as a Georgia fan to end up playing them because, again, there's no value for us to that. I mean, other than winning the SEC championship, we're just stuck playing a game that we've already played and won. And it was a difficult game, hard fought, and it came down right to the end. And it was a very exciting, thrilling win. And so having to do that again, well, that's not going to be particularly fun or exciting. And so I'm sure Alabama feels that way about us. They went on the road and beat us. It was a tense, hard-fought game. They raced out to a lead, and then they had to hold on as we made the comeback effort. And, they pulled out the 3-point win. And why would you want to do that again? I mean, yeah, they'll do it now. But now that we're here, I think the teams and the fans can all look at this and say, well, for Alabama, they're sitting on a precarious position. They're sitting on a place where it's like, hey, are they going to make the playoff? They're 9th right now, but if they lose, they might, a 9-3 at-large team hasn't made it into the playoff yet. So that makes it a little precarious, and they're down near that bottom of that level. Again, the 9 and 10 seeds are the last teams that are going to be in the at-large because they're going to award those 11 and 12 seeds to the Group of 5 champion and whichever ACC team probably emerges out of or possibly another Group of 5 team. The interesting rule there is it does not have to go to the conference. It doesn't have to go to the ACC automatically. It's not guaranteed to the Power 5 conferences or Power 4 conferences nowadays. So a higher ranked team, and it would be really funny if Duke wins because they almost assuredly won't get it. They won't be ranked high enough. So you might end up with 2 Group of 5 teams, or you might end up with an ACC team that didn't play in the ACC championship moving up into that spot. So we'll just have to see how that shakes out. That's going to be really weird. Hopefully, just to keep it from being crazy, I'd rather see Virginia win, and I considered going to Virginia. I have favorable feelings about Virginia anyway, so I have no problem with them winning that game and over Duke and making it into the playoffs. So good for them. Go Hoos. They use that phrase for a reason I'm not going to explain right now. But Wahoos, which is short for Wahoos, which is still weird that, because it has nothing to do with Cavaliers. But anyway, that's a discussion for another day. So, there's a lot of scenarios here that we look at, but right, boiling it down to this game, I think for Alabama, people are starting to doubt them. If you look at the consensus of what people are saying coming into this game, I don't see very many people who are high on Alabama. People aren't just like, oh, Georgia's going to kill them. But most people, when they are discussing, most of the national media personalities and the national football commentators and people I've been hearing talking about, when they talk about these playoff scenarios, they're talking about the one I'm talking about. Well, Alabama losing would create a 3-loss team. They're not just hypothetically. You can tell from the way they're presenting it that they feel like there's a good chance this is going to happen. It's kind of endemic in the way they're describing the setup. Like, well, an Alabama 3-loss team, so. And while we're only a slight favorite, and like I said, the matchup predictor on ESPN actually puts us 1-2 points behind in chance to win, we've been a consistent 2.5 point favorite the whole time. And But, again, we've been favored in 4 or 5 or 6 of 5 of the last 6 out of 5 of the last 6 Alabama Georgia games. And again, we know how that's worked out. We've only won one of them. So being favored doesn't give me a lot of comfort, but I do think we are playing better. And I do think that we have a slightly better overall team. Now that our defense has come up to a level where after the performance against Tech, I think you can look at it and say, look, it's 5, 6, 7 games in a row where we're seeing the stats are still not all completely there because of what happened in the season. But if you just isolate the last 5 or 6 games, and we're going to talk about that as we go through the next phase of the podcast, but as you look at them, though, the stats are coming up to the level, and they're already elite. I mean, we've already moved into that top 12 or 13 in the country. But the way we've been playing the last 5, 6 games, you're talking top 5 in the country defense. So with the defense playing like that, and yes, the offense took a big step back against Georgia Tech, but at the moment we feel like that's an anomaly until we see otherwise. So I'm going to go with the idea it's an anomaly. So I think Georgia really looks like the more complete team, especially on offense where Georgia has both passing weapons. We have tight ends, we have wide receivers, we have running backs, we can run the ball, we can pass the ball. We really have a more flexible offense, and Alabama's offense has been limited to a very pass-oriented offense. They are only, I'm not even sure, we'll talk about it in the next quarter, but I think Alabama might even be slightly being outrushed by their opponents this year, which is the position we were in last year, and we saw that made us vulnerable to even one-dimensional teams like Notre Dame when we got to the playoff. We just were not flexible enough because when our pass game wasn't working and we had a first-time starting quarterback in the game all of a sudden and a game plan that, or a season-long offense that hadn't been geared around the guy who's now playing quarterback, we couldn't just turn around and run the ball because we didn't have that kind of run game. And defense and run stopping becomes a priority. And a lot of teams that are going to make this playoff can do that. And Georgia can do that. And Georgia can run the ball. And so that probably is where most people feel like the difference is in this game. That's why probably, even though it's a really close game on paper, and it's probably going to be a close game in execution, that's why there's, even though it's so close, I feel like there's more like a 65 to 75% consensus moving in the direction of, Georgia should win this game. So, all right, we're going to stop here. That's the end of quarter 3. We'll take a short break, and then we'll be back for quarter 4, where we're going to begin breaking down the game. We may have to end up saving our final prediction to a Saturday morning podcast, or maybe we'll do a full overtime quarter and put the rest of that in a 5 overtime, but I'd like to keep these podcasts a little shorter than that. Been working on that. The quarter system has helped. Even though I run over a little bit, certainly contains it a little bit more. So thank you for being with us. This is quarter 3 of episode 54, Beat Bama Week, as we're getting ready for the SEC Championship. This is Beat Bama Week 2. We had Beat Bama Week 1. Didn't go so well, so we're doing it again, and hopefully we're going to get it right this time. Join me back for quarter 4 in just a few moments of episode 54 of The Daily Dog. Thank you, and go Dogs. Welcome back to quarter 4 of the Daily Dog, episode 54. This is the Beat Bama Week number 2. This is our second crack at beating Bama. So this is Beat Bama Week 2. Beat Bama Week 1 was back in week 5 of the season after the off week. Both us and Alabama had the off week. Came into the big epic clash at Sanford Stadium, and while we didn't win the game, it was quite the showing for Georgia. Honestly, the nation saw just a spectacle as we lit up Sanford Stadium. We had the wristbands. The atmosphere was stunning. People talked about it being one of the loudest and best environments you could imagine. And it was a great game. And it was a great game for people to watch on TV because there was tension, it was close, and it just didn't work our way. So we don't think of it quite with the happy memories, but it certainly was an opportunity for Georgia to show out and look great. So this is our chance at redemption, and that was one of the themes we've been talking about in the first, second, and third quarter, is that this game, I think, has turned into something that is more motivating. I think at first, at least as fans, I think we were all like, oh, this game. I mean, I think Alabama was like, oh, here we go again, another Georgia-Alabama game, and we already beat them, and what's the value of doing this again? For us, right away, there was the value in the redemption that we could correct the wrong of one loss on the season. Was losing to Alabama, and we can turn around and get kind of revenge and payback on that. But was that enough, or is that enough to be motivating? And is winning an SEC championship enough to be motivating when you're looking at a team that you think, hey, the way this team has evolved over the year, I think it does have a chance to play for the national championship. It's too early. Well, right now we don't need to spend the time. We can do it. We're going to have plenty of time once this game is over to look at the other contenders, look at the possible pass-through scenario, and talk about how we match up. But all through the season, I've been talking about, is this team evolving? Do we believe? We know that our standard and our hope is that we're a national championship team, that we're competing for a national championship. But when the season started, we had so many questions. Can Gunnar Stockton be the guy who can lead the team? Can we replace this many people and come back? We don't have those names established yet coming into the season where this guy, this guy, and this guy. We thought C.J. Allen, we thought Raylan Wilson, we thought Christian Miller on defense would all be people. We know we had some talent in the defensive backfield, but a lot of it was young and new, and that had been the strength of our team last year, and a lot of those guys had moved on. And so it was, we saw that. We knew we brought in guys like Zachariah Branch, who was supposed to be a big addition in the portal, but not all portal additions pay off, and just like not all recruits pay off. And last year, the receiving core took a big step back. The loss of Ladd McConkey and Brock Bowers, there wasn't somebody who stepped into that role. We thought maybe Colby Young. Colby Young had the family issues that caused him, I say family, but domestic issues that got adjudicated and came out okay. So he's back with the team, but he looked like possibly a difference maker, but he wasn't with the team for a lot of time. And then sadly, he came on this year and he looked again like the difference maker we thought he would. And then he had the broken lower leg, and now he's out for the season. But other guys have stepped up. Noah Thomas did finally start stepping up as the season went on, and both as a pass catcher and a blocker. Zachariah Branch has been everything we hoped for and more, and he is leading the SEC in receptions right now. Gunnar Stockton has worked his way towards, by the time, look, when the Tech game was over, I think we could put a little bit of a wet blanket over the whole Gunnar Stockton for Heisman idea, because that was really a poor game from him at quarterback. He didn't see reads. He didn't get passes out. He took off running. The net result was he did enough to help us win the game, and he showed his grit and competitiveness, but he got baited into runs that didn't go anywhere and that they were ready for. He didn't take throws that were open, and then the defense built momentum in the second half, and a defense that had not been good most of the season, and especially the last 3 or 4 games, really came into their own against Georgia in the second half. And once they knew that we just, weren't going to be able to pass the ball effectively, and we really needed to run the ball and run out the clock, they were able to stack the line and slow down the run, which we had beat them soundly with in the first half. So that's how that game flowed. And a lot of that was on the fact that we weren't able to get anything done early in the game against a defense. And it wasn't just that the defense was so good in the first half. There was definitely plays that were there that were missed. So, and then of course Bobo going out, affected that. And we're optimistic that now, look, the guys that are the potential replacements are good, maybe even great. Maybe even 1 or 2 of them will develop into an all SEC center type candidate down the road. But if they were better right now than Drew Bobo, our coaches would be playing them there. So we're not better because Bobo is out in this situation, but we will probably be better in this upcoming game because we will have had all week to prepare, and whoever is going to play, or if they're going to rotate people in at center, they're going to know the responsibilities, and the line has had the chance to practice with them. And they also saw some of the things that happened in the game last week against Tech, where there was some misses and some blocks, and they'll be able to clean that up a little bit, hopefully. I mean, they'll at least have the opportunity to address it, coach it, and plan for it. Whether they execute, we'll have to see. But generally speaking, Gunnar Stockton had been answered those questions. He's looked for most of the season like a Heisman-worthy quarterback. Fell off a little short here in the Georgia Tech game, but we're hoping that's an aberration. So we go into this game where we see our team has evolved. And look, only one loss, the chance to be SEC champion, arguably champion of the best conference in football. So the stats are there, and as Georgia as good as Ohio State has looked dominant all season. Indiana, it's hard to get used to the idea of Indiana, probably one of the worst programs. I always talk about history of programs and our proud history and adding to our legacy and our history. Well, Indiana is adding to its legacy and history with every game they win. 11 or 12 wins in a season is like 4 seasons worth of wins in the average history of Indiana football. They've never done what they're doing now, and they have no history of this whatsoever. I guess it's possible they won a conference championship back in the 1960s, I think. I haven't looked it up. But so this is a big deal for them. And it's hard for us as one of these blue blood, historically great teams to look at a team and think, they're really a challenger. But listen, on paper, they're not just winning, and yes, they are not playing great competition, although the distance in the competition may not be as far back as you might think. The statistic analysis that I've been working on this year, I've been telling you guys, if you've been listening, I've been working on my own statistical analysis, and I'm calling it the Daily Dawg Power Statistics or Power Stats metric. And so what it is designed to do is to look at the stats and judge how the team has done in the stats. That doesn't mean when you look at the ranking by this, for instance, I can tell you right now, Georgia was 8th in this metric that I've created by my rankings last week or before the Tech game. After the Tech game, we come out 10th. Other teams have moved up a little bit. We had it all. I mean, statistically, the defense was great. One of the best games of the season, if not the best game. I mean, by numbers, we did a little better against Charlotte, but I mean, come on, that was Charlotte. Georgia Tech was was in the top 10 offensively coming into this game, and we held them to 250 yards and 9 points. Those things help, but unfortunately, actually, our statistics have been trending so well on defense, it really didn't actually change our rankings in the metrics, the part of the metrics and the statistical metric that's involved in the defense. We basically held ground, maybe moved up a half a point here or there. But offensively, only scoring 16 points and only generating 260 yards of offense, we went from averaging 435 yards of offense to 416. We went from being in the top 30 overall, top 28. We were 28th in yardage and 26th in points, and now we're like 40 and 35. I mean, so we really fell back a considerable distance, and there's more teams stacked in that area, in that low 400s offensive production, and in that low 30-point range, which is where we are. We had been up close to like 33 points, 33 and a half. Now we're back down around 32 and a half. So that wasn't as big a loss, but there's a lot of teams stacked in there, a lot of teams averaging right in that low 30 spot. So, and then same thing on the offensive yardage. It's a big difference. Several teams of position exist between averaging 416 yards and 435. So we lost some ground in that metric, but overall, we're playing like a team. I mean, overall, our defense is a top 10, top 12 defense at this point. And again, if you sort of just look at the second half of the season, you grade on a curve, you might say we're easily a top 10 defense. But by any metric, we're a top 12, top 13 defense right now. Offense is an upper third. There's the top third of the country would be 44 teams. There's 134, 136 teams in FBS. So if you're in the mid 40s, you're in the top third of college football. So offensively, we're in the top third of college football. We're in the elite top 10 or 12 of college football defensively. That makes for a pretty good combination. And we do a lot of other things really well. We're really good on special teams. We have a great punter. We have a great kicker, and we cover well. and we tackle well. So generally speaking, and of course coaching, we saw Kirby put on a master clinic of coaching against Texas. So, and we've seen you get used to the fact that you get frustrated about how many of those games we came out and we're down early, or we're trailing at the half, or we look like we hadn't played well in the first half, and then we dominate the second half, and you say, it makes you feel like, well, why didn't we just dominate the whole game? But you've heard people make mention of it. It's easy to kind of blow off or be a little blasé about how good a job Kirby and the coaching staff do getting that team back out on the field for the second half to dominate those games. So that is, and then talk about the preparation and the planning and the conditioning work that you had to do to go up against two top 15, top 20 teams this year in Texas and Ole Miss, and have in both games a 17-0 fourth quarter and a 21-0 fourth quarter. That's, that's execution, that's coaching, and that's also conditioning and preparedness. So again, all points back to masterful coaching, right? So, I mean, we don't want to just blow sunshine here everywhere and be like, oh, well, but I'm trying to make the point that, look, throughout the season, we didn't start with a lot of confidence that we were a team that could win the national championship this year. We could hope, and we know that we have been the last 4 or 5 years, but this team didn't start number 1, number 2, or number 3, even like the 2023 team did, and then go 12-0 and look dominant throughout big chunks of the season. This team began building towards dominance and only achieved it towards the end of the season. But other than the aberration on offense, and even though the offense wasn't there, the Tech game, like we talked about, Georgia was in control of that game. Georgia, the defense especially, just dominated in a way we haven't seen in a while. And it really gives you a lot of comfort that, look, and it gives you that sense that, yeah, see, you don't have to, Georgia doesn't have to have everything go 100% right to beat good teams. They can actually have one side of the ball take the night off almost, and still, or they can, or as we've seen early in the season, one side of the ball could take a half off and come back and play really well in the second half, and Georgia can still win those games, even against top 25, top 10 teams. Almost did it against Alabama. So this time, we need to get our act together, play a little stronger, and, hopefully play throughout. I don't even know what to hope for. If you think of the history of all these Alabama games, these last 10, 11 Alabama games, we have been up. Yeah, I was detailing back in quarter 2, quarter 3, the 2017 season, 2018 championship game. At 2017 season, we led that whole game. I mean, it's easy to forget. Everybody remembers 2nd and 26 and how terrible that was. You remember it's overtime and we settled for the field goal, but we led the whole game until the final minute. Bama only tied it up at the end. And then, they were playing so poorly in that game, they had to switch quarterbacks to make the comeback. Okay. So, and then the next year in the SEC championship game, same thing. We led significantly in the game, and same thing. They switched back. They went from the quarterback they switched to in the game against us the year before back to the quarterback they benched from the previous year. And again, a quarterback who went on to, go to Oklahoma and be a top quarterback and go to the NFL and win a Super Bowl. So these are not lightweight players we're talking about. And yet Georgia made these guys, both of those guys, those quarterbacks, Tua and Jalen Hurts, are both NFL starters. One of them's a Super Bowl champion. So these were elite quarterbacks, and Georgia was able to make them look so bad that they were benched in the game. And, Coach Saban had decided his only chance to win those games was to bench his quarterback and, go with a different guy. So, we've led, we've fallen behind and come back, like the game at Tuscaloosa last year. We fell behind in this season's game, and it looked like we had 3 different opportunities to tie and take the lead. As I've said so many times, you're probably sick of hearing it. So I don't know what to hope for, really. I don't know whether I want to see us come out and jump out to a big lead, because, Auburn had a big lead. I mean, Alabama had a big lead against Auburn last week. They were up 17-0. Auburn came back, and Auburn's been a doormat offensively all year. Auburn put up 411 yards of offense against Alabama. It's the turnovers saved Alabama to some degree in that game. So I don't know. I fear if we got up big, it would be, that the team, I don't know. We've gotten up big before, but we've never crested the hump. Each time we've gotten up, like I think we were ahead in one of those games. I was talking about the SEC championship game, maybe 20-7. or no, I guess in the national championship game, I think we were ahead 20-7. So that's one of those scores that's deceptive. You look at it and it's like, wow, you got 20 something, and they are in single digits. But when you stop and think about it, it's a 13-point game. 2 touchdowns would win the game. Fortunately, Alabama didn't get 2 touchdowns. That's why they were only able to tie it up in the end. They had to use all 3 scores to get it to a tie, 20-all, at the end of the game. So it's not like our defense just collapsed, but we were never able to just, put that distance. We were up 13-0, and then they scored, and then we had a long touchdown. I remember that in the game now. They put it back to 20-7, and you thought, okay, if we can just keep doing that, whatever they do, match it. But then that's where it stopped. After that long touchdown, we were not able to make any drives at all again that got us into scoring position. Even a field goal seemingly would have won the national championship somewhere in that second half. One field goal, So I don't know what to hope for. I don't know what to expect. I am scared, of losing this game. I'm all in now. I'm excited. I believe in us as a championship team. I think this is our moment. I think these seniors, I think these players are just sick of hearing they lost to Alabama. Those who haven't always been a part of it, who are younger, didn't feel responsible because maybe they were on the bench. They had the pain of losing, being the only game they lost this year. They're being asked over and over again, what's the deal with Alabama? Are you ever going to win a game against Alabama? And it's the thing they haven't done. Some of the seniors have won, going back to that 2021 national championship game. There's a few guys there that were in that game and won it. But most of these guys are living with that. You can't beat Alabama. You can do everything, but you can't beat Alabama. And I'm hoping that as we get into the preparation this week, that has just become a little bit of that underdog mantra that Kirby seems to dig out of these guys sometimes, that like nobody believes in you, you can't do it. Now, the problem is everybody seems to believe in Georgia right now, like I was saying in quarter 3 of the podcast. But I think that they're able to shut that out a little bit, and I just think that they're going to be focused. Now, emotions and focus isn't going to win the game. It's going to be execution. It was execution that lost us the game. It was execution that lost the game in 2023. And so execution is what can win this game. We have a good enough team if we play our game and execute to win this game. So we didn't get down to the breakdown, so we're going to have to do another podcast. We're already a little long in quarter 4. I'm not going to go much deeper into overtime. So this has just been a lot of focus on the game. But I really hope and think and feel that we're all kind of, I think we're all kind of like, okay, another game. And for me, I wasn't even expecting this game. I really had come to believe that Texas Tech was going to win against Texas, or whatever the circumstance was. We weren't going to end up in the SEC championship game. And I was kind of happy with that. I mean, again, I came to the position when you have a chance, you should always want to win the SEC championship. But I felt like, a couple key guys were banged up. We already knew Bobo was hurt. And so I could look and say, look, maybe if we've got a month off, he's back. I don't know what kind of injury it is, but it didn't look like something he was going to come back a week later from, like in the Tech game. And, and it just felt like it would be good to see our team. Several guys are hurt and on the precipice of coming back. CJ Allen was back in the Tech game, but there's no way he's really 100%, 10 days removed from a meniscus surgery. But now he's, 14 days plus or whatever removed from a meniscus surgery. So that's better. And he did play pretty well, but, and I'm glad to have him back out there, but there's a good chance that by the time you get to January 1st, if that's our first playoff game, we'll have a bunch of guys. We'll have some new guys back. We'll have some guys that are healthier. We'll be a stronger team. So it didn't seem like that bad a deal to get a home playoff game against an overmatched opponent and then get to the next round and get some guys healthy and get going. So, but the game kind of, like I said, I was watching, I turned off TV, wasn't watching football, was doing something else with the family. Information comes across, Texas A&M lost. And, right away I'm like, oh my gosh, we're playing the SEC championship game. And look, so I'm super proud. 5 in a row, equaled the record by Florida. 8 of the last 9. Chance to win the game for the 6th time. And we really need or want to do that, to burnish our record a little bit because we've played in the game 12 times. We're 5-7, so we already have a losing record. 6-7 would look a little better. And, add that 16th SEC championship that we've been talking about. So this is an exciting opportunity, and I think the team is going to be focused. I'm sure the coaching, I'm sure everybody's sick of it. So I don't think being sick of hearing about Alabama and the elephant literally the elephant, since they have an elephant mascot in the room, I don't think all that is necessarily the difference maker. I'm not saying they were unfocused before or didn't have the right emotion before, but I just have the sense that this might be the time that they put it together and play a more complete game against Alabama and get it done. And, avenge the loss, not lose to the same team twice in a season like Texas did last year, and win this SEC championship, and then really set us on a path. Like I said before, I think that would be a huge springboard. The way this team has already played this season, can't kill us mentality, never give up mentality, fire, passion, energy. You add the understanding that they've finally gotten that nemesis, that elephant off their back, and beaten Alabama. I think then you really will have a team that completely believes and is bought in and feels like they are the best team in the country and will play like it as they go through the playoffs. Is that enough to beat Ohio State if that's the team we end up matched against, or Oregon, or some of these other, maybe even Texas Tech? We're going to talk about that after the SEC championship. So look, we'll have one more podcast. I might get it out tonight so that it's available starting tonight. It'll certainly be ready by first thing in the morning, and it'll be the breakdown and predictions. I'm leaning, as you can tell, in the way of that Georgia's going to win this game. My gut instinct, I'll just go ahead and say now, for those of you who've gone through this and wanted a prediction, my gut instinct is that, we win a 3 to 10 point game. I think there's a chance we could stretch it out. I think there's a chance that, again, we just keep executing throughout the game. And if we do, I think we can win each quarter by a score. So maybe just a field goal, right? But if we won all 4 quarters by a field goal, then that's a 12-point game. I think that's in reach. Or maybe we win the first quarter by 7. Maybe we win. Maybe we're up 10 at the half. Maybe we gain no ground, and the third quarter is just a net neutral. Nobody wins, nobody loses, and then maybe we add another field goal just to put an accent on it in the fourth quarter, and we win by 13. It would feel like winning by 50 the way games have gone against Alabama. I think that's a flow that I could see happening, and I feel pretty confident about. I'm not exactly sure about the total score, but I feel like reversing. I also think we could just reverse it. Could be 27-24 this time, Georgia just slightly ahead. I just think that I think it's going to be something in that range. I don't think it's going to be, just an epic blowout beatdown, but I think there's a good chance that Georgia feels like they're in control, but it's close and tight because Bama's that good and they're going to keep putting pressure on us. But I think their one-dimensionality is going to hurt them more in this game, like it did against Oklahoma. And if we can reverse the trend where we're the ones that make the mistake, again, we had a fumble that led to a field goal in this year's Alabama game, and we lost by a field goal. That was way back in the first quarter of the game, first half of the game. So it's hard to say that was the play that won or lost the game. And I don't want to pin that on Nate Frazier. He's going to be motivated. He got benched in that game and was, his role lessened for the next couple games. So he's been playing like a man possessed the last couple games, and the Alabama rush defense has not been awesome, and Chauncey Bowens ripped through it for 130 yards last time we played. So how about if Chauncey Bowens, who should be back this game, what if he comes out and has 75, 80 yards to go with 120 by Frazier, and we have over 200 yards rushing again and control the game? I could see that. I think it's possible, and it would be a great strategy, because the more we can execute, hold the ball, and control the game, and not let Ty Simpson and the offense on the field and have to play pass defense, the better off we'll be. That's not our strength. We've gotten better on the pass rush. We're putting more pressure on quarterbacks. So I don't think he's just going to stand there and pick us apart like he did last time. But we're also, but I think he's too good, and he can make throws under duress, and they have receivers that can catch contested balls. So that's what makes them tough, right? Is they're not just a sort of a cushy or a soft passing game, right? Soft passing game, meaning like they scheme a lot of guys wide open, and they're so wide open they make easy plays. They can do that too, but they are a team that can just beat you on a 13-yard pass and just rip it out of the air in front of you, or take a slant over the middle where they know they're getting hit and you're right on their back the whole time in their hip pocket, but they still catch the contested ball. And so the less opportunities we give them. But if you do that, if you slow down the game, you grind it out, you rush the ball, you pound them, and you take control of the game, you have to be efficient. You have to score. And that's where we did that to some degree against Tech. We never complemented with the passing game, and we did slow it down. We only had the 9 possessions, and we scored on 4 of them, but we settled for field goals. So that's the other thing, is we've got to convert back to getting touchdowns. If we can get 3 touchdowns or 4 touchdowns in this game, whatever we do on field goals, I think that could be enough. So, but we'll have to see. So listen, we're going to call it from here. Again, there'll be a sort of a final breakdown. I guess, we'll just talk about the numbers and where the teams have been. I mean, these teams well enough. I don't think we have to do the whole, oh my gosh, who's this team? What's the breakdown? We can just talk a little bit more in the next podcast about how the teams have played since they saw each other, where we think they match up and where they don't. I can just tell you, it's super close. These teams mirror each other very well. Alabama's defense is just ahead of us in statistics. Alabama's offense is just behind us. Combined, we basically look like the same team on paper. So there's not much separation to find in that. The biggest difference is that they don't run the ball very well. They pass the ball really well. They don't run the ball very well. And they don't defend the rush as well as we do. And that's probably why most people, including me, even though we think, close game, really close game could be the result here, are going to lean in favor of Georgia. So, listen, thank you so much for being with us. I'm super excited. I hope you're excited. This is a tremendous opportunity, and I am hoping that the team takes advantage of it, and we will all be ecstatic and have a lot to talk about on Saturday and Sunday and Monday if all that comes together. So let's hope, let's wish, and let's believe. Go Dogs.